Hey guys, this is Mr. Grice for Algebra 2, Unit 0.4, Notes, Day 3. Today we're going to talk about solving compound inequalities involving and. So our learning target today is to be able to solve compound inequalities involving and. So let's review the two types of inequalities. So our first one is an or. It says x is less than or equal to -3 or x is greater than 1. So we have to graph each part of that. So my first one, x is less than or equal to -3. I know that that's going to be closed. So at -3, I am closed, and it's less than, so that means I'm going to shade everything to the left. Or x is greater than 1. At 1, I'm going to be open, and if I'm greater, I'm shading everything to the right. So there you go. Now our next one, and -3 is less than or equal to x, and x is less than 1. Now, let's take a look at this inequality real quick. I can rewrite that so the variable is first, and when the variable is first, it is pointing at the -3. And then my other one, the x is less than 1, it's already written there, okay? So at -3, I am closed, and I'm shading to the right. At 1, I am open, and I'm shading to the left. Okay, so with an or, we're shading the outsides, and with an and, we're shading the middle. Okay, so let's take a look at writing these ourselves. Okay, so for A, if you want to write the 2 first, because I see that x is greater than or equal to -8, or x is less than 0. I know it's less than because it's open. And when I put them together, everything is always pointing to the left. So less than or equal to x, which is less than 0. Okay? And double check that it matches up because I need to be closed and open because of those points. Okay? Now our next one, I have x is less than 0 or x is greater than or equal to +7. So I'm looking at the points and it's telling me what to do. Okay? Why don't you try C and D on your own? Go ahead and pause the video and good luck. Okay, for C, we have x is less than or equal to -3 or x is greater than 0. And for D, we have 2 is less than x and x is less than or equal to 5. All right, let's move on. So the solutions to compound inequalities involving and must always be written in increasing order. So if they're out of order, we have to rewrite them so that they are written correctly and graph. Okay? So if I'm looking, I always want to see, are they in order from least to greatest? And they're not. It should be -6, x, and then 0. Okay? So between the x and the 6, it's open and pointing at the 6. And then between the 0 and the x, it is closed and pointing at the x. Does that make sense? All I'm really doing is flipping everything so it's in order from least to greatest, okay? And then when I graph, I can just put the -6. There's my 0. At -6, I'm open. At 0, I am closed. And this is an and graph, so I'm shading the middle. Okay? So let's try it again. I'm looking at the numbers. -4 is smaller, less than or equal to x. less than -1, okay? I'm just looking at where the inequality is with each part and then writing it correctly. So when I graph it, there's -1, or -4, I'm sorry, and then there's -1. At -4, I am closed. At 1, I am open, and it's an AND graph, so I'm going to shade everything in between. Okay? All right. Now let's look. The next part says to solve each compound inequality, you do not need to graph, and to write your final answers in increasing order. Okay, so when we are solving, I'm going to zoom in a little bit on these. Okay, I want to get the x by itself. Okay, but what I do to one side, I have to do to all three sides. So I'm following the rules of SADMAP. So to get the x by itself, I would subtract 1, but if I do it to one side, I have to do it to all three. -5 minus 1 is -6. The sign stays the same because I didn't do anything to it. And then 2 minus 1 is 1. And that's it, guys. That's all we had to do, okay? We don't have to graph these ones. All right, let's look at 2. Find your variable, and you want to get it by itself. It's subtracting 7, so I need to add 7. Add 7 to all three sides. That's why I'm drawing the lines. 0 plus 7 is 7, less than or equal to y, which is less than, I'm sorry, that should have been a plus, 8. Y is by itself. So there we go. All done. All right. Find your variable. That's multiplication. The opposite, the inverse of multiplication is division. So I have to do it to all three sides. Do I flip the signs? No. Good. So I have -1 is less than a, which is less than or equal to 2. You only flip if you multiply or divide by a negative number. Okay, number 4. Remember that that bar, that means division, so the opposite, the inverse of division, is multiplication. So I need to multiply all three sides by 3. -1 times 3 is -3, less than or equal to w, which is less than or equal to 0 times 3 is, good, 0. Number 5. Do you see your variable? Yep. And how do I get rid of a fraction? By multiplying by the reciprocal. So what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. 5 times 4 is 20. 20 divided by 2 is -10, less than or equal to the n by itself. -5 times, or -2 times 5 is -10. -10 divided by 2 is -5. Okay? And if you're using your calculator for this, remember to put that in parentheses. Okay? All right. Now they're starting to get a little bit longer. Okay? Remember, follow the rules of SADMAP. Cancel addition or subtraction first, so I'm going to subtract the 4. That cancels. -2 minus 4 is -6, which is less than 3x, which is less than or equal to 9. Don't forget your inequality symbols, guys, okay? Or your negatives. To get the x by itself, I need to divide by 3. -6 divided by 3 is -2, which is less than x, which is less than or equal to 3. And there we go. What do you think? You guys getting a hand of this? All right, good. Let's move on to the harder ones. Okay, so now these are saying to solve. All right, we have to solve and graph each compound inequality. All right, let's see if they get harder. So I'm going to draw the lines down so I can see all three sides. There's my n. I'm going to subtract 4 to everything. 2 minus 4 is -2, which is less than n over 2, which is less than 1. To get the n by itself, I need to multiply all three sides by 2. -2 times 2 is -4, which is less than n, which is less than 2. There we go. There's my answer. Okay, but it also said I need to graph. Okay, so there's -4, there's 2. At 4, I am open and I'm shading to the left. And then at 2, I'm open and I'm shading to the, oh, sorry. Whoop. Did I get them all again? All right, so Mr. Grice forgot this one, and we're shading in the middle. Okay. That was a close one. All right, number 8. There's my m. So I need to add 3 to all the sides. -7 plus 3 is -4, is less than 2/3 m, which is less than or equal to 0. To get the variable by itself, I need to multiply by the reciprocal to all three sides. Okay? Well, on the right, it's easy because 0 times 3 over 2 is going to be 0. Now, 3 times -4 is -12, and -12 divided by 2 is -6. Okay? Remember, if you're using your calculator, put the parentheses, or put your fraction inside parentheses. Okay, let's see if I can get this one right. So at -6, I am open. At 0, I am closed. And then we shade the middle. Woohoo! Way to go, Mr. Grice. All right, number 9's got an asterisk by it, which means I got to do something special. Now, the -3 doesn't mean I add 3 to both sides. No, because it's next to the variable, so I have to divide. And when I divide everything by -3, I divide by negative, which means I have to flip, okay? And I have to flip all the signs, okay? So -6 divided by -3 is a +2, and 9 divided by -3 is -3, okay? And now, if I'm looking at this, they're not in increasing order, so I have to rewrite, okay? So when I rewrite, the -3 goes here, then my m, and then my 2. Between the m and the -3, it is pointing at the -3. Oops. And between the 2 and the m, it is not only pointing at the m, but it's also less than or equal to. Okay? And now that I got that, I get to graph it. So -3 we're going to open, and 2 we're going to be closed. And then we shade everything in the middle. Okay. Number 10. find your variable. Now, if you're having trouble seeing what you're supposed to do, I'm just going to rewrite this in standard form. That's a negative 2y and a positive 1. So now that tells me that I have to subtract the 1 first to all three sides. We get negative 8 is less than or equal to a negative 2y, don't forget that that's negative, less than negative 4. To get the y by itself, I divide all three sides by a negative 2, which is 4y and then 2, and the thing that I didn't write down yet, good, I divided by negative, so I have to flip the signs. Okay, they're not in the proper order, so I'm going to rewrite them. 2 less than y less than or equal to 4. Okay, and you guys go ahead, pause the video, and see if you can graph that on your own. Good luck. Okay, and there you go. At 2, we are open, and 4, we are closed. All right, so little by little, we're adding more steps. Now I'm going to have to distribute. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times negative x is negative 2x. Okay, this is the same thing with our last one. That 6 is actually positive, so I'm going to subtract 6 to all three sides. 4 minus 6 is negative 2, which is less than a negative 2x. Don't forget about that negative. And 6 minus 6 is 0. To get the x by itself, I'm going to divide everything by negative 2. And since I'm dividing by a negative, I know I have to flip that sign. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is a positive 1. 0 divided by negative 2 is 0. And since they're not in decrease or increasing order, I'm going to need to rewrite. Sorry, I forgot to write that we flipped right there. So 0, x, and 1, and then everything's pointing to the left. Okay. 0, 1, I'm open at both, and I shade the middle. Okay, last one, number 12, you are all on your own. Go ahead and pause the video, and good luck. Okay, so I had to add 5 to all three sides. Divide by negative 4. When I divided by negative 4, I flipped the signs. And since they weren't in increasing order, I rewrote it. So my final answer is negative 2 is less than d, which is less than or equal to 1. Okay. Well, guys, that's it. Now, your homework is a worksheet that I don't have right now. So, good luck on your homework. This is Mr. Grice signing off for Algebra 2, Unit 0.4 Notes, Day 3. Thanks for watching.